Hello again, thanks for choosing us. The World Bank is largely blaming the Bank of Ghana for the current economic downturn. The bank, in its latest Africa Pulse report, says that, among other things, the delay in the introduction of monetary policy measures to deal with the worsening economic indicators, especially inflation, is to blame. The bank also makes a very gloomy prediction of Ghana's economy, including the projection that the GDP to debt ratio could hit 104%. We'll bring you details of all of that shortly. But as you may know, the cause of our current woes has been a political football, with the opposition accusing government of mismanagement. But government has always insisted the ravages of COVID-19 and the adverse effect of the Russia-Ukraine war is to blame for the economic downturn. But guess what? The IMF backed the government's position. Kristalina Kyogiva gave this interview to my colleague Benjamin Akapo just last month.
I am very determined for us to indeed reach an agreement by the end of this year. We started very constructive discussions already, and to the people of Ghana, like everybody on this planet, you have been hurt by exogenous shocks. First the pandemic, then Russia's war in Ukraine. And that we need to realize is not because of bad policies in the country, but because of this combination of shocks. And therefore, we have to support Ghana because you're a member, you're a strong country, you have fantastic people. But also we have to support Ghana because your strength contributes to the strength of your neighbors. It contributes to a stronger world.
We asked for 1.5 billion initially. Now they're asking for 3 billion. Will we get it?
Let's go through the discussions and then we will know.
Now, the World Bank, in its latest Africa Pulse report, gives other reasons besides COVID and the Russia-Ukraine war for our woes. My colleague Kofi Eje, who is a data analyst with our research desk, joins me in the studio with some more detail on this report. Kofi, first of all, what, according to the World Bank, has been the role of the central bank in bringing us to this point?
So basically, the World Bank is saying that the Bank of Ghana, which is the central bank, delayed in the introduction of their monetary policies, and then that has also caused this current projection that you see on the touch screen. So the World Bank has these 5 countries that they are projecting that by the end of this year, which is 2022, these 5 countries will all record debt to GDP above 100%. So usually when Ghana is put in a certain bracket, we see ourselves with countries like Cote d'Ivoire, Nigeria, and Kenya. But this time around, this bracket has new countries and that we are not used to them. The first country that IMF is projecting that their debt to GDP ratio will be above 100% is Eritrea, with a projection of 234.9% by the end of 2022. Next is South Sudan itself, with a debt to GDP projection of 183.8%. There's Cape Verde with 147.7%. And there is our beloved country, Ghana, 104.6% by the end of the year. And there is also Mozambique, 102.6% by end of the year. So we decided to track Ghana's debt to GDP ratio from 2017 to IMF's projection. So you can actually see an upward trajectory right from 2017, 55.5% of debt to GDP ratio to as of June 2022, the Bank of Ghana said that they pegged our debt to GDP ratio at 78.3%. Now the IMF is projecting that by the end of the year we'll have debt to GDP ratio of 104.6%. And this is expected to come down a bit in 2023 to 99.7%, then go up again in the election year 2024 to 101.8%. Now, just like you said, the reason that the IMF, I want to read this, it says that in Ghana, the central bank, which is Bank of Ghana, delayed in interest rate hikes until inflation soared from 13.3% in January 2022 to 19.4% in March 2022, followed by, a massive depreciation of the cedi. That's also one, indicator that the IMF spoke about, the depreciation of the cedi. So they actually gave us this outline, the worst performing currencies in sub-Saharan Africa. These are the 5 worst performing currencies in sub-Saharan Africa. And guess what? Ghana is number 1 with a depreciation rate to the dollar of 60%. Next is South Sudan, 50.8%. There's Sudan at 26%. Even Sudan is doing better than us, 28.6%. There's Malawi. We are not used to Malawi, 25.4%. And there's the CFA franc of 13.3%. Ghana taking the lead there. So just look at this, Ernest. This is very interesting. So right from 2017 to 2022, look at the upward trajectory of the cedi depreciation rate. So just last year, the entire 2021, the cedi lost just 4% of its value to the dollar. Now, 2022, we are just about 10 months into the year, right? And the cedi has lost 60% of its value.
It's our worst year yet.
Exactly. Look at this, bar chart versus all the other ones. You can see the variance over there is very huge. None is even getting closer to this 60% that we are talking about. But in 2019, the World Bank, in a joint statement they released with the IMF, gave their, their scorecard on our economy, because people have been, attributing this to COVID and Russia-Ukraine tension. But before COVID, this was IMF's, scorecard on our economy. So rates of external debt distress, they say it was high. Overall rates of debt distress, high. Then, granularity in the risk rating was sustainable. Then there's also the area that's not applicable. But recently we've seen Fitch actually downgrading us from a triple C to now to a double C. Now, what does it mean? It means we are actually in a very terrible zone. When you are in this double C, it actually means that default is imminent. And when you are in default, it will be very difficult for you to actually come back to your normal level. So what does this mean to our IMF program that we are looking at, about 3 billion? What does it mean if you have debt, unsustainable debt levels? IMF is saying that in cases where a country's debt is assessed as unsustainable, the IMF is precluded from providing financial support unless the member takes steps to restore debt, sustainability, including by seeking a debt restructuring from its creditors. So we have domestic and foreign as well. So we have to weigh the two and see where we'll have to restructure our debt.
And we know that is key at the heart of the conversation, the negotiations happening. The finance minister has indicated that we don't have an agreement yet, but we know that they must make this analysis and know where we stand before they can give us a deal. Even though Kenneth Ferrata insists we'll get one before he reads the budget. But Kofi, thank you very much for bringing us those figures. Let's go on to Zoom right now and speak to an economist at the University of Ghana Business School, Dr. Patrick Esumin. I'm grateful that you could join us. First of all, help us understand what the World Bank is saying. What does it mean if you are at debt distress? And what will be the consequence on the economy for us?
Good evening, and good evening to viewers. So, the classification simply means that, really, our debt has reached a level that, we cannot comfortably pay our debt. So, some form of intervention is needed. Some form of intervention from our debtors is needed to help us to cope with our debt. So, our debt has reached a level where really we can't pay. Given our current cash flows, it's difficult for us to pay the debt. What does this mean for the economy? Well, ordinarily, it means that we have to, so what this means is that we have to, immediately in terms of dealing with the debt, the first thing you want to do is to make sure that you don't keep piling up the debt and that you take measures to address the growth of the debt. So that's the immediate thing. Then also going forward, you want to stabilize the debt first of all, and then start taking measures to bring down the debt.
And Doc, currently, our debt to GDP ratio stands at 48% as of June. I know that has been disputed in terms of how it is calculated, but for the World Bank to project a 104% by end of year, some find it a bit exaggerated. What is your take on this?
Yeah, it seems very pessimistic to me. I think from where we currently stand, it will take a high rate of accumulation for us to take it all the way to the 104% they are projecting. So it seems quite pessimistic.
Even if you consider the issues they raise, which is the fact that we'll have a widening deficit, the cedi will continue to depreciate further, and then that will have consequence for our servicing of the debt. These are the issues they raise to back the 104 projection they make. Yes,
so I think even if you take them on their own projection of the extent of cedi depreciation, we still have only 3 months to the end of the year. So if the cedi continue at the current pace that we've seen over the course of the year, I'm not sure that we have to go to that extent. So it still feels quite pessimistic to me.
Right.
And I'm not sure what the projections that they are using, because it's the numerator and the denominator. So so I think if you consider that in the second quarter we grew a little bit faster than many people would have expected, maybe it still feels 104 still looks on the higher side to me.
But what will this then be, the effect of this on our negotiations with the IMF? Because the IMF needs to do a debt sustainability analysis, and per what we've seen on the books, once they come to the conclusion that your debt is not sustainable, you do not qualify for a program. The finance minister is optimistic that this time round we are going to secure a deal, and in fact he may make an announcement during the budget reading just next month. How do you see these projections and analysis and reports affecting our interaction with the IMF?
I think it just raises it makes it more likely that the debt restructuring that has been going on, that discussion is more likely to happen. It increases the chances that the debt sustainability analysis will conclude that our debt is not sustainable, and therefore the restructuring has to happen before. It seems, if you look at where we are now, it seems still it will take a break, very fast. Things have to progress very quickly before we'll be able to come up with a program before the finance minister announces the budget. But you can see that the pace of the negotiations seem to have picked up a little bit. Right. But, the debt structuring element coming in also means some more potential delay, because it means that we have to come to some agreement with our debtors before we can go ahead with the IMF program. So it increases the possibility that the deal will delay.
Well, we'll see how that pans out. They'll be meeting some stakeholders today, including the Finance Committee of Parliament, and we'll be monitoring closely on what the negotiations, what actually transpires. And thank you very much, Dr. Patrick Esumin. Let's do something.
Join Prime is brought to you by
Mala 2 is suitable for adults and children.
Pella, purity comes from nature.